Where am I? The cold sea water slapped on his face, caught off guard, and the fishy and salty sea water poured into his mouth. Roger almost suffocated, and he stroked his body vigorously. The dark sea is full of wind and rain. Is it a dream? I clearly remember that I was rowing a boat near the Skellig Islands in the game to see the scenery. Why did I get to such a place in the blink of an eye? Isn't it crossing into the world of the game? Roger looked terrified. You must know that the game world he was immersed in was low productivity. The most important thing was that various monsters emerged in an endless stream. Living in such a world could not compare with Coke fried chicken and video games. Although I don't know what happened, the cold water and the incomparable sense of reality remind Roger that everything in front of him is real. The wind and rain blocked his vision. Roger could only vaguely see a little light in the distance. Ignoring the others, he summoned the only strength left on his body to swim forward. Click! A bolt of lightning pierced the night sky, and the waves swept through and almost stunned him, but fortunately he was moving in the same direction as the wind. Otherwise, even if he swam to death in this environment, he might not be able to get close to the distant light. Before finally exhausting his physical strength, Roger was washed to the shore with the waves. In the darkness, he seemed to hit the rock, and he turned around suddenly, and landed on the beach. His head was dizzy. He was struggling to get up but couldn't do his best. A figure appeared in the dark, and Roger widened his eyes hard and stretched out his right hand for help. Then uncontrollable exhaustion surged into his heart, his eyes went dark, and he completely lost consciousness. Before he fell into a coma, he saw a shotgun in his hand and a shiny harpoon hanging from his waist. The rain is clear. The sun rises from the coastline, and the islands that have been washed clean by the torrential rain will be refreshed. It didn't take long after waking up, and Roger determined one thing. I crossed over by myself. I don't know where he is, but obviously, his current body does not belong to him. Did you suddenly die overnight? To be honest, Roger didn't even know what happened before. He sat up and looked around. He was quietly relieved until he saw some slightly outdated modern facilities. At least it is a modern civilized society. The space around is not big, all kinds of items are piled up together, it looks very messy, it looks like a warehouse. He was simply bandaged on his head. At this time, except for a little groggy, it was not a big problem, but his stomach was empty, and he couldn't lift his strength a little. Roger was thinking about something, and suddenly from the spiral staircase above, there was a creak of footsteps. Then a burly white man with thick hair and a messy beard walked down with a plate. "Thank you for saving me last night." Roger spoke. But a mouth surprised him. A fluent English was spit out from his mouth. In his previous life, his English level was fair, but he was barely able to communicate with foreigners, but he was absolutely unable to speak so fluently now, even with the accent a little bit. The big white man put the plate on the table. The thick beard covers most of his face, making it difficult to tell his age, but from the exposed skin, he should be 40 years old. Often does manual labor, he looks extremely strong. Compared with Roger's current body, it looks like an adult and a child. "Leave here when you finish eating." The voice of the big man was cold like a rock in the sea. Roger was a little embarrassed. He was stuck in his mouth when he wanted to ask, but he was really hungry at this time, picking up the food on the plate and stuffing it into his mouth frantically. The big man did not leave, but stood in front of the stairs, looking at Roger blankly. Cushioned his stomach a little, the hunger subsided a bit, and Roger squeezed a smile again. "Thank you for saving me, my name is Roger, how about you?" "Roger." There was a slight change in the expression on the big man's face. "This is really a dirty name. It seems that your father gave you this name and he really has high hopes for you." Roger looked embarrassed. This is naturally his real name, but the two words Roger and Roger sound a bit similar, and Roger means to have something indescribable with certain people. It is between a man and a woman. is said to refer specifically to a certain posture. Haha. Roger smiled awkwardly, but with this episode, it also narrowed the distance between the two sides. Where is this, please? Roger asked. An island. The man replied stiffly. At this moment, there seemed to be some noises from upstairs, and the man's expression changed. Have you finished eating? Hurry up when you finish eating. He almost violently pulled Roger up from the bed, and then pushed him downstairs. The guy had a lot of strength, and Roger estimated that if he was a little slower, he might be waiting for him with a fist. Roger, who was confused, was pushed out of the door by the opponent. Only then did he realize that the room he was in was on the first floor of a lighthouse. After walking out of the iron gate, a beautiful island appeared in front of him. The lush trees, the blue water in the distance and the horizon lined up, which made Roger, who had been living in the steel jungle in his previous life, feel a little better. Wait! The man urged Roger. You read www.yuyuganshu.com and closed the iron door. After a while, when he came out again, there was already an extra baggage roll in his hand. Follow me. Locked the iron door, then hung the key around his neck, the man pulled Roger and walked away. The small island is not very large, and the white lighthouse he just walked out of stands in the center. The wall of the lighthouse has fallen off, obviously it has been some years. Someone would live in a place where such birds don't shit? Although he was puzzled, Roger did not dare to ask more when he first arrived, so he could only follow the man. They are at a higher position at this time. From here, you can see most of the island. The entire island is not big, only a few kilometers. Before he can take a closer look, Roger was urged by the man to a small island. On the edge of the woods. In the clearing in front of the woods, there is a somewhat dilapidated wooden house. Gave Roger what he was holding. You will live here from now on. I will prepare some food for you when I go back. Don't run around. The climate here is changeable. Don't go to the beach at night. It seemed that he knew what Roger was going to ask, and the man continued, the storm interrupted communications at sea. However, there will be a supply ship landing in a month. I will inform you at that time and you can leave by boat. After speaking, the man left without looking back. Roger stood there blankly, he even forgot to thank him and ask some questions. Because in front of his eyes, a strange line of text appeared. I found a dilapidated seaside hut, whether to assimilate it. After successful, migration will not be possible until the next upgrade. I rubbed it. Is this the legendary crossing Goldfinger? After confirming it several times, Roger tried to calm himself down. He had to make sure that everything in front of him was not an illusion. Took a few deep breaths. He didn't assimilate right away. He didn't know anything about the world, and in a literal sense, the opportunity for assimilation was extremely precious. The issue of migration was also mentioned above. What if there is a better choice? Roger hesitated. He is so excited at this time, he must find something for himself to calm his brain completely. Took the luggage and walked into the wooden house. The environment inside is really worthy of the adjective dilapidated. Except for a bed that is intact, the rest of the wooden furniture is basically torn down. The wooden house is divided into several rooms: kitchen, bathroom, living room, and living room. In addition, Roger also saw a simple bookshelf in one room. Obviously, the original owner of the cabin should be a studious person. Of course, the bookshelves are also empty. After a few rounds of inspection, Roger found that although the structure of the wooden house looks complete, there are a lot of wooden boards missing on the roof, and there are many water leaks in the house. Do you want me to decorate it myself? Although he has done a lot of work in his previous life, repairing houses is obviously not included in this list. There is a place in the lighthouse, why don't you let me live there? It is deceptive to say that there is no emotion. But Roger just thought about it, the other party saved his life, and if he read it right, the man obviously had a gun in his hand. The body is too much stronger than himself. It is definitely useless to play horizontally. I can only slowly figure out a way to brush my sense of existence and see if I can get some help from him. After spending the whole morning, Roger cleaned up the garbage and dust inside the wooden house. During this period, the man came again. This time he brought some rice noodles, canned food, and some compressed vegetables to Roger. He also told Roger that there was fresh water not far behind the woods. After a few words, the man seemed to be in a hurry, so he turned and left. His head was still a little dizzy, and his body didn't have much strength. After eating some canned food at noon, he took a short rest, and Roger went to the woods not far behind and took a circle. He didn't go far, but got acquainted with the terrain. After finding the spring water, he returned to the wooden house. After thinking about it again and again, he decided to activate his special ability here. Roger had also thought about finding a better place after leaving here, but what worries him more by comparison is whether he will close the door to open special abilities forever after he refuses this time. If that were the case, he would suffer a lot. The big deal is to live on the island for some time. I don't know anything about this world. Staying here may be a kind of protection in disguise. Roger thought silently. At the same time, he controlled his mind and chose to assimilate the wooden house. In an instant, a strange feeling rose from his heart, as if an inexplicable force connected him to the wooden house he was in. This kind of feeling is very strange, not the kind of fusion, but more like symbiosis. There are no dazzling light and shadow special effects, everything is done in an instant, except for an extra wooden house model in Roger's mind. He tried to control his mind and clicked. Dilapidated seaside wooden house, level 0 has the most basic structure, barely able to complete rest and maintain ordinary life, the only furniture is a wooden bed. The independent study is commendable, but unfortunately, there is no knowledge there. Completeness, 79%. Please fix it as soon as possible to open all the functions of the cabin. Rejuvenating wooden bed, no matter how tired, as long as you rest on it for more than 8 hours, you can be refreshed and become the harvester of the sorcerer again. Roger took the initiative to block the last sentence. On this deserted island, there is only him and a man who is as strong as a bear. What a strange ability! There was a surprise in his heart. Roger sat on the bed and felt it carefully, but he didn't notice anything abnormal. Seeing the completeness displayed on the log cabin information, Roger had a thought in his mind. If I repair this wooden house completely, will there be more functions? Do as you think. But Roger cleaned up around, but found helplessly that he was a clever woman who could not cook without rice, except for some broken planks, hammers, nails, and wood saws he had picked up in the room. In desperation, Roger could only close the door and walk quickly to the lighthouse. What he is wearing should be that man's clothes. The clothes are so big that Roger wears like a ridiculous monkey. My body won't be underage, right? There is no road on the island. The man is obviously not a hard-working person. It rained last night and there was mud everywhere. The iron gate is still closed at the lighthouse. Roger knocked on the door, but no one responded. Anyone there? He yelled, then knocked on the door again. Did you go out? Roger was a little confused, but when he was about to leave, the iron gate suddenly opened, and the man's majestic body blocked the door, looking at Roger with a guard. What's up? He was panting, his face still a little sweaty. Are you leaving in a hurry? Are there tools like hammers and nails here? Roger asked. The house leaks rain everywhere. I have to live here for another month. I have to fix it before the next thunderstorm, otherwise I won't be able to live. Roger looked inside the room, and gave the man another hint, hoping to get help from the other party. The man blocked Roger's line of sight, he hesitated, and nodded. Wait here. After closing the door, he went upstairs. Roger tried to pull the doorknob. Was locked by the opponent again. This guy is either withdrawn and hates getting along with others, reading www.yuyugonshu.com, or he has some secrets. Roger was vigilant. In the movies of the previous life, there were many men and women who died because of curiosity. When you get the tools, stay away from the lighthouse, and reduce your contact with him before the supply ship arrives. Roger thought silently. Although he is also curious, he doesn't want to cause trouble. Since the other party is willing to save himself, at least his nature is not bad. Don't be dead by yourself. Just then, the iron door was opened, and the man walked out with a small wooden box. Everything you want is here. There is nothing here, and neither do I. The implication was that he didn't want Roger to come to disturb him again. The rice noodles he left for Roger were enough to consume for a month. Thank you, sir. If you need to use tools, you can go to my place anytime. I have a spare. The man said indifferently, and before Roger could respond, he planned to close the iron door directly. Snapped. Roger stretched out his left leg to block the threshold. Seeing Roger's movement, the man's face changed abruptly, his eyes widened, and a fierce breath rushed toward him. What are you going to do? The man stared at Roger, like a beast ready to attack. His throat rolled, Roger swallowed non-existent saliva. Under the strong pressure, he put a hee-hee smile on his face. Sir, I don't mean anything else. It's too boring to be on the island alone, I only need a few books. A few books are fine. Roger pretended to be calm and replied. Carrying a small wooden box and a few books, Roger left the lighthouse. Until he walked far away, Roger felt that there seemed to be a gaze on the lighthouse watching him. Shook his head helplessly. The last request he made was not just for understanding. The entire island was deserted, only himself and the old man, and Roger didn't know anything about this strange world. He urgently needs to obtain some information from the outside world, even if it is just a few words, and this knowledge can only be obtained from books. The wooden house he lives in may have belonged to the man a long time ago, and the empty bookshelf reminded Roger. He specifically pointed out that he is more interested in knowledge of history and geography, so most of the books he obtained are related to this. Back to the cabin, Roger put the few books on the shelf, and he did not rush to read them. The top priority now is to repair the damaged wooden house. The weather on the sea is fickle. Although there was a storm only yesterday, no one knows when the next storm will come. That eccentric man made Roger secretly vigilant, and now even if the other party invites him to live in the lighthouse, I am afraid that Roger will not agree. This is a big project. Roger shook his head helplessly. The only number of planks in his hand was not many, which was not enough for him to completely repair the entire wooden house. Climbed to the roof and checked it, and found a few relatively large rain leaks. After thinking about it, Roger made a decision. Solving the problem of rain leakage is the most important thing. Finding the nails and hammers from the toolbox, he imitated the previous repair mode and nailed all the wooden boards in his hands. When there was not enough space left, he demolished the east wall to repair the west wall, and removed it from the house and the door. Some less important places are then added to the roof. Has been busy until sunset Zishan, Roger barely finished, and the integrity of the cabin rose from 79% to 84%. The extra part is actually only the wooden boards he nailed, and his behavior of demolishing the wall is obviously not counted. It should be, no more rain leaks. Wiping his sweat, Roger nodded in satisfaction. Sweat all over his body, and he was exhausted. He made some food and gobbled it down. Endless exhaustion came to my heart, and he simply cleaned it up. After the sun went down, he fell on the bed. There are no large animals on the island. As for the man in the lighthouse, Roger has nothing to worry about. He is weak now, and the opponent has a gun in his hand. He really wants to do something to him, but he can't resist. In a daze, Roger fell asleep. No words for a night. Wake up early in the morning, Roger immediately experienced a refreshing sensation that he had never experienced before. He was clear-eyed, and yesterday's exhaustion was wiped out, and he seemed to have inexhaustible power in his body. Is this the special effect of the wooden bed? It's really a magical thing. Inspired in his heart, Roger showed infinite confidence in his future life. After eating breakfast, he took the tools to the woods behind him, and he needed to process the remaining wood himself. Went around in the woods several times, and it really made him find a few dead trees. These trees are not too tall. After cutting down the rotten roots and laying them down, Roger dragged the dead wood with a rope back to the open space in front of the wooden house. Naturally, he couldn't perform any fine processing with his technique. Even cutting the bandsaw, it took him all morning to get out a few irregular-shaped wooden blocks. After lunch, he took a short break and did not continue to work. His current physical fitness is very poor, and it is not efficient to continue working. So he simply went to the study to read a few books from the lighthouse. Throughout the afternoon, Roger stayed at home, flipping through the book in his hand, and gained some understanding of the world he lives in now. This place should still be the Earth, and the regional structure has basically not changed much, but there have been great discrepancies in the specific distribution and cultural inheritance. Some countries and regions that he was familiar with in his previous life did not appear. Instead, they were some strange places. This kind of familiarity and strangeness made it more difficult for Roger to understand. Seeing those familiar names, he always subconsciously wants to match the area in the previous life, but in reality, even if he has the same name, the difference between the two will be very big. The country he is now in should be the United States in the previous life, but Roger can't figure out the specific location, and the level of technology is about the same as that around the millennium in the previous life. The specific historical process is tens of thousands of miles away, and Roger has no intention of paying attention to these. He can't make up any decent lie now. If someone asks him, just push all the problems to amnesia. While it was not dark, Roger took the time to do some work again. His only lighting equipment was a kerosene lamp that was not very bright. Don't expect a kerosene lamp to do much on this desert island. When the sky darkened completely, Roger stopped his work and saw that the integrity had increased to 91%, and he showed a satisfied smile. After eating, sitting on the stump in front of the wooden house, Roger missed the leisurely life of his previous life very much. Although it's not a rich and expensive thing, it's more than enough. I should be preparing to start my own rich nightlife in the usual time. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com can now? Looked at the hands where the cocoon was worn out, he shook his head helplessly, and went back to rest. There is no change in life. It took Roger 2 more days to repair the house after reading a book and finally completely repaired the wooden house. When he smashed the last nail, there was an inexplicable warm current on his body, the wooden house model in his mind glowed faintly, and he controlled his mind and touched it. Simple seaside wooden house, level 0, a simple house that can only satisfy basic life, without any furniture except a bed. Special area, the study room, has been opened. Extra bonus, none. Please upgrade as soon as possible to open more functions. The above is all the information. Roger blinked. Is it gone? What about the newbie gift pack? What about the lottery system? After 3 days I was exhausted, so did you open a study room for me? Is this wooden house for the students to cultivate? I hope that I will study and practice every day, and become a master of all disciplines as soon as possible. From the outside, there seems to be no change in the whole wooden house, but Roger still noticed some differences after walking around the wooden house a few times. His previous repairs were very rough, to be honest, they made up a mess, but when the completeness reached 100, the wooden house seemed to be self-improving, and it seemed much stronger and more reasonable. With the last thought, Roger came to the study. He finally found the biggest difference here. There were unexpectedly a few more books on the empty bookshelf. With the excitement in his heart, he raised his hand and pulled out one of them. Basic herbal medicine. What is this? Seeing the book in his hand, Roger couldn't help but frown. He opened the book with the doubt in his heart. The realistic medicinal patterns and detailed herbal properties came into view. He read it patiently, and soon saw some familiar words in it. White zinnia, dandelion, moon rose petals, rhamnus, blood moss, horn moss, datura. Roger's eyelids twitched. He was so familiar with the names of these herbs. In the game, he had collected a lot of them madly. A thought came out in his heart, and with the ecstasy in his heart, he pulled out a book again. Monster Illustrated Book. There is a familiar witch hunter logo on the cover of the book, but when you open the book, there is a blank in the heavy book. After flipping through it from beginning to end, Roger did not find a picture or a word. Does it mean that there are no legendary monsters in this world, or is it just because I didn't meet them? There was a worry in Roger's heart, but soon this worry was replaced by intense curiosity. He took out one more copy. Basic Alchemy Notes. The content on the cover made him ecstatic. The powerful alchemy in the game world is simply an official bug. If this thing can be used in reality, can open a thick book, but only the beginning part has text, the rest is blank. Does it need to be unlocked? Roger seems to understand something, but he is not disappointed. Even if he tells him all the formulas now, if there is no material, no powerful formula will work. 10,000 steps back and said, even if he was lucky enough to make a powerful potion, can he dare to drink? Alchemy potions are all toxic. Verified the conjecture in his heart, Roger was ecstatic in his heart, and the books in the study opened a brand new door for him. Following this path, he will surely gain extraordinary power far beyond ordinary people. Demon Hunter. Sorceress Pile Driver. Okay. Roger nodded thoughtfully. As he thought, he opened the last book on the shelf. This book is thinner than other books. After opening it, there is a clear line written on the title page, Nilfgaard's Basic Physical Strengthening Technique. Roger can't wait to read it, improve his strength and survivability. This is what he urgently needs now. A powerful empire is inseparable from a powerful army. This is the basic exercise that Nilfgaard soldiers need to practice before joining the army. Only after completing this exercise and possessing a strong physique can they become a qualified empire soldier. Records. A detailed breathing method, combined with special physical skills, can enhance a person's physical fitness in a very short time. In addition to physical strength, a basic fighting technique was introduced later. After flipping backwards, Roger was disappointed that he did not find swordsmanship. A steel sword and a silver sword. 1 kill, 1 kill, this is the standard equipment of the demon hunter, but after thinking about it carefully, even if you have practiced swordsmanship, it seems to be of little use in this peaceful age. It's impossible for him to carry 2 swords everywhere. It is estimated that before he has walked far in the street, the police will come and chat with him. The above is all his gains after opening the study. What am I now? A demon hunter in reserve. Will there be more powerful cultivation methods in the future, and even information related to the trial of the grass? The demon hunter's powerful perception ability, superhuman physical agility, repair ability, and supernatural seal. Roger began to look forward to it. After the excitement, he quickly became calm. Demon hunters can be said to be a non-human being created to fight against monsters. All their abilities are used to fight. The monster picture book on the desktop made Roger vigilant. Thinking about it at this time, he suddenly felt that the world he was in now might not be so peaceful on the surface. Maybe in the dark, there are hidden monsters that are not known to ordinary people. Is it lucky or unfortunate to acquire this ability? Uttered a word of helplessness. Roger began to become greedy again. In the novels he had read in his previous life, many protagonists didn't need to work hard at all. The father of the system would naturally rise up like a rocket all the way. But when I get to him, I feel hard. It is not him who has the bug, but his house. He can only practice hard by himself. Forget it, the heart is not enough to swallow an elephant. Just work hard. Roger was very pragmatic. He calmed down and glanced through the books in his hand. This time, he found a formula that can be used at this stage in the alchemy notes. Concentration potion, toxicity, none. After use, it can greatly improve mental concentration and physical control ability, allowing users to achieve several or tens of times the previous learning and training effect in a very short period of time. Duration, it depends on the user's mental and physical exhaustion. After the effect of the drug is over, the user will enter a state of long-term mental distraction. Cannot be used when energy is low. If used forcibly, vomiting, dizziness and slight hallucinations may occur. This is just tailor-made for me. Roger patted his thigh. When a person is extremely attentive, the speed of perceptual control and knowledge acquisition of the body is much faster than normal. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com and this concentration potion, the effect is probably even more domineering. Of course, its side effects must be very strong. But these are not a problem for Roger. His only furniture wooden bed has the magical effect of restoring energy. As long as he finishes using the potion, he lies on the bed and sleeps. After waking up, he will be full of blood and resurrected. With these two things, they are assisting Nilfgaard's physical strengthening art, and Roger's improvement speed will definitely be far beyond imagination. But I need to find the herbal formula that focuses on potion first. Roger frowned. The formula of the concentration potion is not the few herbs he was familiar with before, but some names that he had never touched before, but one of the herbs was green as a whole, and the leaves spread out like petals. Looking at the pattern on the book, Roger felt as if he had seen it when he was looking for a water source. Next, he worked hard to write down the characteristics and shapes of several other herbs that were used to synthesize concentration potions. Then put all the books on the shelf. Took the rag bag and shovel, went out and went into the woods behind him. Roger is not worried about the secrets of his cabin being discovered by others, because all the things and objects in the room that are different from reality are only effective for him. For others, it is just a simple wooden bed, and the books on the shelf do not exist. 3 hours later, after sweeping the small woods behind him, Roger finally got all the herbs he needed. It's just that one of them looks different from the herbal illustration, and I don't know if it will affect the final effect. There is no corresponding alchemy vessel, so he can only set up the pot and try it. First mash the green leaf grass, remove all the broken grass leaves, and take the juice. Roger looked at the unfolded alchemy notes while operating. He thought it would be very simple, but in practice, he found that it was very difficult. The wording of the share recorded above is vague, and there is no specific weighing unit in his hand, so I can only guess about the graphics on the book. If I do this, I won't eat myself to death, am I? Seeing the liquid medicine boiling in the pot, Roger said to himself. The first step of alchemy is to extract, and it took a lot of effort to consume all the herbs collected, only to barely get some basic liquid medicine. While extracting, he put another part of the herb into a pot and boiled, then slowly boiled it over a low fire, and finally got half a pot of black slime. This is an auxiliary item for practicing physical strengthening. The 3 herbs used to squeeze the juice reacted strangely after being boiled, and then put the green leaf grass, the stamens of the parley flower and the dead wood roots in sequence. The last thing I got was a kind of ointment that exuded a strange smell like a paste. Apply this thing on the body, during exercise, it can promote muscle growth and improve the body quickly. Is this food really edible? Looking at the light green liquid in the bowl, he hesitated for a while. Roger drank it all in one shot. Is a bit bitter, a bit fishy, and has a strong earthy smell. There seems to be nothing else. Roger was thinking. Suddenly a scorching breath spread upward from his stomach, and the entire esophagus was burning, and the feeling was as if flames were gushing out of his throat. Roger couldn't help opening his mouth, but he couldn't make a sound strangely, and then the scorching breath continued to rise, penetrating the top of his head. Drink! The whole brain seemed to be opened. He felt that his spirit had become extremely focused, and his perception had been doubled. Compared with before, it was like replacing a motorcycle with an airplane engine. This feels great. When he turned on Nilfgaard's physical strengthening technique, the original complicated and precise movements and breathing methods that did not conform to human breathing habits instantly came to mind. Knowledge is sorted and absorbed. Only in a moment, Roger felt that he had completely mastered the essentials of physical strengthening. He can't wait to experiment now. Taking off his clothes as quickly as possible, Roger stood naked in the open space in front of the wooden bed, and then evenly smeared the mucus that was still warm on his body. He dipped a piece of rag on the place where his back was out of reach. Ointment, rub it up. Recalled all the movements of the physical strengthening technique in his mind, and then his body began to twist quickly. Time passed by every minute. An hour later, Roger, who was in a state of excitement, suddenly stagnated. Muscle tears, joint friction, and tidal fatigue suddenly poured out. He felt as if his head had been dug out of thin air, and a strong vomit, accompanied by the smell of the ointment on his body after drying, he almost vomited out. His stomach was empty, but before he could do anything, Roger collapsed on the ground like mud. His eyelids were so heavy, he felt that he might faint at any time. This is the so-called non-toxicity. Roger was shocked. It is hard for him to imagine a real alchemy medicine. To what extent would its efficacy and side effects be overbearing? He bit his mouth abruptly, and with a hint of sobriety brought about by pain, he rolled over and fell on the wooden bed behind him with the utmost willpower. After doing this, Roger felt like his body was about to split. Should I train myself to death, am I? The last thought flashed in his mind, and the next moment the darkness struck him. He completely lost consciousness. At this time, the sun is slightly down, and the whole island is quiet, no one knows what's happening here. Dimly. When Roger opened his eyes again, he saw a ray of moonlight coming in from the window. How long did I sleep? Roger murmured, then propped up the bedboard and planned to sit up, but with his force, he immediately noticed the difference. My power! Roger's face changed slightly. He stood up abruptly, but because of too much force, the whole person staggered forward, clenched his fist slightly, and his arm showed strength far beyond before. Secretly estimated, Roger felt that his current physique was very close to the standard of a normal adult. I just exercised once, and I have improved so much. If I practice 10 times and 8 times, can I become a Superman? But soon he swept this idea out of his mind. Since it is a basic physical strengthening technique, there must be an upper limit, but if you practice normally, the effect of this thing should not be so overbearing. It seems to be focused on the effect of potion. Adapted to the surge of strength on his body, Roger only noticed the ointment sticking to his body at this time. After the ointment dries, it was very uncomfortable to stick on his body, and the bedding was also stained a lot. I slept, not only refreshed, but the nausea that felt like the brain was dug out disappeared, and even the fatigue on my body was wiped out. This is really a good thing. The magic of the wooden bed made Roger greatly admired. He tore off the dirty sheet and walked out wrapped in the sheet without wearing any clothes. The island at night is not as hot and breezy as during the day. Roger felt the wind blowing, so he wrapped his sheets tightly and walked to a distant beach. It was when the moon was full, reading www.yuyuganshu.com, the bright moonlight shone on the island, and after his strength increased, Roger even felt that he was walking a lot faster. It didn't take long for him to come to the beach. There is a low-lying area. After the sea water ebbs, a lake-like area is formed in the same place. Before the injury on his forehead was clear, he leaned on the edge and slipped into the sea. The cold water washed away the dirt on his body and washed his body. He was even reluctant to get up, and his upper body leaned on the stone, soaking up. Took a cold sea bath. If there are 3 or 2 more female warlocks by your side, tisk tisk, this is the life of a witcher. Roger couldn't help sighing. But when he was about to get up and leave, there was a voice not far away. It's really beautiful moonlight, we haven't had this relaxing experience for a long time. Is that man? Roger's heart tightened. He just wanted to speak, but suddenly realized the meaning of the other party's words. We. There are others here. Roger's face changed drastically. At this time, he could no longer care about the unhealed wound on his forehead, and took a deep breath and dived carefully into the water. Then, by the moonlight, around the boulder behind him, carefully hidden himself. Due to the limitation of the terrain, there is a vast ocean behind him. Under this kind of light, as long as he emerges, he will be spotted by the other party. At this time, the tall man has appeared in Roger's sight. He is alone. But when Roger was in doubt, the water splashed, and a light blue figure with webbed feet broke through the water and jumped onto the man's back. Under the moonlight, Roger clearly saw the other party's head like a fish. What is this? If it wasn't because half of his face was submerged in the water, Roger might have exclaimed just now. The bright moon was in the sky, and silver light poured down on the sea, shining here like daylight. The creature on the opposite side is light blue overall, and its height is similar to that of an ordinary adult female. From the external physiological structure, it should be a female creature. The surface of her body is covered with a layer of very thin scales, her eyes are round and her pupils are yellow and orange. She embraces the man's neck with her hands, sticks out her slender tongue, and licks his face. Don't worry, we have all night. The man let out a hearty laugh, and then he embraced the murloc-like female creature into his arms with one hand supporting her body, and the other hand kept walking. Roger's eyelids pulsed wildly when he looked from a distance, and a bad premonition suddenly appeared in his heart. Sure enough, the movements of the two creatures were getting bigger and bigger, the water splashed, and they expected me to do something indescribable. As the battle escalated, both sides seemed to feel that the water was not convenient. Later, the man actually put the female murloc on a rock and then rushed on it again. Fuck! The three views were subverted. Roger felt that his eyes were almost blinded. The sound kept hitting his eardrums. The most painful thing was that he had to keep quiet and not let himself make any noise. The temperature of the sea at night was very low. Roger had soaked in the water for a long time before. At this time, staying in the water for a long time, his body temperature dropped rapidly, and he even felt that his legs were a little cramped. No, it can't go on like this. Once someone finds traces of cramps in the legs, I'm afraid it will cause unnecessary trouble. Thinking of this, Roger tried to move, but he stayed in the water for too long. The moment he moved, his movements would inevitably be too loud, and the splash caused a sound. Wow! There is no wind at night, and a little bit of sound is particularly harsh. At this moment, the female mermaid who was lying on the rock enjoying her in the distance suddenly exerted force, pushed the man away from her body, and shot it fiercely. Then let out a hissing low growl in the direction of the sound. The man was caught off guard and was overturned into the water. He quickly got out of the water and looked at the murloc with a puzzled look. What happened? He frowned, and looked in the direction of the murloc's growl. The man only saw a huge boulder. But he just hesitated, he stretched out his hand to soothe the murloc, and then swam over cautiously. Approached the rock, his speed gradually slowed down, carefully climbed up the rock, and then suddenly exerted force and rushed to the other side. He looked around wisely, and he didn't know when he had an extra short knife in his hand, glowing with cold light in the moonlight. The water was calm and the waves were calm. A hint of doubt flashed in the man's heart. He suddenly remembered another person who had appeared on the island. His heart sank and naturally lost his interest. He hurriedly cleaned up and disappeared into the night. At the same time, Roger's figure suddenly emerged from a place 100 meters away from the coastline. He was panting heavily, and the long holding of his breath made him look a little dark. But after taking a short break, he slid his hands and feet, made a big circle, and swam towards the beach. After went ashore, Roger didn't make any stop, speeded up his pace, and quickly returned to his wooden house. He closed the door, and then dried the sea water on his body as quickly as possible. Before he could wipe his hair, there was a soft noise on the clearing outside the wooden house. Roger was surprised. Those were some of the little tricks he arranged on the periphery of the room. There were no animals on the island, and that could only explain one thing. Someone is approaching here. In an instant, several thoughts were constantly clashing in Roger's brain. What do I do? Run? No, this island is too small, there is no ship and no supplies, even if I escape, where can I escape? He quickly rejected the idea. Hidden in the dark and fight with each other. There was a sudden impulse in his heart, blood rushing up. Roger looked around quickly, his eyes rested on the wooden saw and iron axe at the door. Those were his only two weapons. I just hide behind the door carefully and wait for the other person to come in. As soon as the thought came out, even Roger himself was taken aback. He never thought that one day he would have the urge to kill. The scalp swelled, and the footsteps were getting closer, leaving Roger to think about it. In the darkness, a trace of firmness flashed in his eyes, and he rushed to the bed as quickly as possible. After a few breaths, a burly figure appeared at the door. He just stopped for a while, then carefully approached the window, then followed the cracks in the wooden boards on the window and looked into the room. Moonlight shines through the gap in the room. The man's eyeballs rolled, his eyes fixed on the back of the bed. He walked to the door, and his palm was on the thin wooden board. He can push open the door just by applying light pressure. At this time, Roger Khan was hiding behind the door, and his heart was about to explode in his chest. He had to cover his mouth and nose with one hand to prevent his heavy breathing from arousing the other's vigilance. The other hand clenched the iron axe tightly, because the force was too strong. The veins in his hand burst, and the knuckles were slightly white. The heart was beating violently. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Roger didn't know what would happen in the next moment, he even felt that he was about to suffocate. I do not know how long it has been. Maybe a few seconds, maybe a minute. The man let go of his hand on the wooden door, then quietly backed away, the sound of footsteps drifting away. It wasn't until a long time later that Roger suddenly let go of his hand. He panted heavily, and his body collapsed to the ground like mud. Ha, hi, ha. Because of lack of oxygen, his brain is a little dizzy. After a while, Roger stood up on the wall. He stumbled to the bed, opened the human-shaped quilt, and lay down naked. If it wasn't because he took off his clothes before, in a short period of time he would really not find anything to wrap up in the quilt. Roger did not feel sleepy at all. He put the axe in his arms, half squinted his eyes and stared out the window, and kept reminiscing about the scene that he had just seen on the beach in his mind. Who is this man? Are you a wizard or something? Did he tame or create that Murloc-like monster? Countless thoughts collided in Roger's mind. He stayed up all night and fell asleep in a trance until the sky was bright. In his dream, he saw the terrible monster again. The monster opened his blood basin and threw him down, and then tore his chest with sharp claws. Hey! In horror, Roger let out a shout, then sat up abruptly. Sweat wetted the bed, and he was in shock. At this moment, there was a soft noise outside the door. Boy named Roger, come open the door for me. It's him. Roger was shocked, but after what happened last night, he quickly calmed down, then pretended to be sleepy and got out of bed and opened the door. With the door ajar, Roger rubbed his eyes, his face pretending to be sleepy, but his eyes followed his fingers and looked at the man opposite. The weather changed a bit last night, I guess there may be a storm recently. The man opposite said slowly, as if he was trying something. At night. Roger murmured casually, but there were no flaws in the expression on his face. "Don't worry, sir, I have repaired the wooden house, there should be no problems," Roger replied, blocking the door with his body. The man nodded, as if he didn't intend to go into it. "Pay more attention." He tore a broken net from his shoulder. "You can't always eat dry food, you can try your luck nearby and see if you can catch fish." Hearing this, Roger was shocked in his heart. He suddenly realized that although he was lucky enough to pass the test last night, the footprints left on the beach after going ashore were very clear. "If you want to check." "What?" Although he tried to hide it, Roger's expression still showed some abnormalities, and he was discovered by the man on the opposite side. "Oh, nothing, I just never did anything like this." Roger pretended to be sad. The expression on the man's face moved slightly, and there seemed to be a trace of unbearable flashes in his eyes. From his point of view, the thin boy on the opposite side could barely be considered a half-old child. "Maybe I'm worrying too much. If you don't understand, you can ask me, if you have time. Maybe I can guide you." The man left this sentence. Before he left, he hesitated and said, "You don't need to call me Mr., you can call me Can't." Roger watched the man named Can't leave. Although he knew the man's name, the relationship between the two seemed to become more harmonious. But instead of feeling relaxed, he felt heavy inside, because what he saw last night really subverted his past worldview. There are really monsters in this world. Maybe there are extraordinary powers too. Can't take care of food, he put on his clothes and ran to the beach at the fastest speed. After arriving at the beach, Roger discovered that the rising tide last night cleaned up the traces on the shore. "When I got close to the island, the traces became less obvious." Did he find out? Roger is also confused about this. Let's take one step at a time. The most important thing in front of you is to improve your own strength. Only when you have the power to protect yourself, will you have time to consider other things. He was shocked by the murderous intent he suddenly broke out last night. In any case, this man was considered to have saved him, but when he was facing possible danger at that time, he did not hesitate to choose Hedon. Judging from Roger's past personality, this is really incredible. Is the original owner of this body a radical guy? Shook his head and drove the messy thoughts out of his mind. Now that he came to the beach, he tried to fish in the water. Needless to say, the result. Got nothing. Leaving from the seashore, Roger began to explore the entire island again. The herbs he collected for the first time had been used all, and if he wanted to exercise, he could only redistribute it. After half of the morning passed, Roger returned to the wooden house hungry. This time his luck was not so good and his harvest was very limited. After a simple lunch, he took a short break and then tried to exercise himself. Pain, numbness, and itching, the huge physical reaction makes him feel uncomfortable, not to mention maintaining the breathing rhythm, even the movements are deformed severely. 2 hours of hard work, except for mental exhaustion and physical aches, Roger felt that he had little effect. But he didn't plan to give up completely. The improvement after taking the concentration medicine is indeed huge, but he does not want to ignore the usual accumulation and exercise. If he can complete this set of training in a normal state, it will also greatly improve his own will. After a short break, Roger dragged his exhausted body and continued to go out to search. He didn't return to the wooden house until the sky was dark. The area of the island was not large, and there were not many areas he could explore. This entire day, he almost carpeted the island to sweep the island, only to reluctantly scrape out the ingredients for the potion. Although there must be omissions in the process, it also made Roger a little worried. The rest of the ingredients are good, except for one of the plants called ironwood vine. This is a kind of companion plant, attached to the lush root system of the plant. Only after it grows to a certain extent, will it affect the companion plant, and then it will be discovered through its characteristics. Once again gathered the herbs, Roger started his own brewing again. With the first experience, this time the configuration process was faster. After getting the concentration potion, he didn't take it immediately. The night was approaching. After the events of last night, he was a little worried. In order to avoid accidents, he decided to stay on for another day. If Kant does not appear again tonight, it means that he may have temporarily dispelled his doubts. Putting the axe in his arms, Roger half squinted his eyes until dawn. Nothing happened except for the intermittent sound of waves. In the next few days, life entered a monotonous repetition, and in the process, Roger took 2 more concentration medicines. After 2 upgrades, his physical fitness has greatly increased. Although he still looks thin and weak, he is slightly under the skin and in the fascia. The thin body contains powerful strength. Although it is slightly inferior to a strong guy like Kant, it is much stronger than an ordinary person who doesn't exercise. The collection of herbs became more and more difficult, and taking advantage of one of the opportunities to take the concentration potion, he also wrote down the basic fighting skills in the books. When a person is alone, he will exercise secretly, except for eating and resting and looking for herbs, he spends the rest of his time on it. After several attempts, Roger also gained some experience. He could catch some fish with a fishing net. With the intake of protein, his originally shriveled body was slightly full. That's it. Unknowingly, a week has passed, and it has been 10 days since Roger Deng Island. During this period, Kant hadn't been here once, and Roger naturally ended up in a leisurely manner, and it was even more impossible to take the initiative to look for him. After dinner that day, Roger closed the doors and windows and climbed into bed early. Outside the window, the sea breeze was whistling, and a faint electric glow could be seen in the thick clouds. The storm is coming again. Crackling. The gust of wind and showers roared. Roger shrank in the quilt, feeling like a boat floating in the sea, which reminded him of the first day in this world. It's just that today's rain is heavier, and the wind is more urgent. Rumbling, lightning and thunder. But at this moment, a bolt of lightning flashed across the night sky, and Roger's eyes passed by the window. Lightning shines outside the window like daytime, but in an instant, he saw a hideous face appearing outside the house. Roger was shocked. He subconsciously squeezed the iron axe hidden under the pillow. Since that night, this weapon has not left his hand. Could it be an illusion? His heart is tense, and his breathing becomes a little quicker. Rumbling, a flash of lightning flashed again. The window is wide open, and there are no so-called monsters. Just as Roger felt calm, there was a low roar outside the window, and then there was a loud noise. The wooden door creaked overwhelmingly. Something seemed to be crashing frantically. In addition to the sound, Roger finally saw another figure wandering outside the window. It was a blue murloc with a hideous face and a height of about 1.5 meters. Unlike the one I saw in Kant not long ago, this murloc appeared stronger. His body was covered with rough scales. There are some water plants hanging on it. Their heads are basically indistinguishable from human characteristics, their eyes protrude outward, and their fangs-filled mouths occupy almost half of their faces. The body is squatting, and the strong and exaggerated palms are sharp claws. What the is this? For a second or two, Roger's brain became blank, but with the previous shock, he quickly woke up, turned over and jumped off the bed, and then rushed to the door quickly. In order to prevent Kant's sneak attack, Roger took advantage of his spare time these few days to strengthen the windows and wooden doors of his wooden house in multiple layers. If you follow the previous defense level, this wooden door might break in response to the first impact. You can't let these terrible things come in. The space in the wooden house is small. Although this monster does not seem to be as tall as an ordinary person, its strength should not be high. But their limbs are very long and they must move very fast. Coupled with sharp teeth and claws, once they are entangled, at most a few breaths will be shredded. Facing the crisis, Roger realized that his brain had become extremely calm at this moment. He dragged a temporarily assembled table against the door, and then brought an iron axe to the window. By the lightning outside the window, he could see that one of the murlocs was violently hitting the wooden door, while the other was wandering aimlessly. Seemed to notice Roger, the murloc roared and rushed to the window. 2. The sharp claws slashed across the plank and took away large swaths of sawdust. This guy is so fast. Roger was surprised. Just then, he heard a faint gunshot from a distance. It's Kant. Has he also been attacked there? Kant lives in the lighthouse. Except for the observation deck on the top floor, the entire lighthouse is made of cement. Even if there are 100 such monsters, it is impossible to push it to the lighthouse. Unless they can break through the iron gate at the bottom, or climb the wall to the top of the tower, otherwise, the lighthouse on the island is really the strongest fortress. The gunfire became denser, and obviously, more than one monster attacked the lighthouse. What kind of world is this? Roger was already a little weak to spit out. Taking advantage of the murloc outside the window to pounce too hard, he swung the iron axe in his hand. The iron axe was like cutting a piece of blunt wood. With a scream, Roger chopped off half of the murloc's palm. Light blue blood splashed and landed on Roger's face. Was cut off by half of his palm, but the murloc became even more crazy. Using his hands and feet together, with sharp teeth, he slammed into the wooden window frantically. Roger's reinforcement of the windows is obviously not as good as the wooden door. Under the manic attack of the murloc, a gap was quickly opened. The murloc roared and squeezed in from the gap abruptly. The first thing that got in was half of his body and one arm. He opened his blood basin and opened his mouth, and there was a stench in his mouth, his jaw opened and closed, and he was biting frantically. Roger backed half a step back. He felt that his heart was about to jump out of his chest. At most 3 seconds, the murloc could completely destroy the window, and then squeezed into the room forcibly, followed by another one. His scalp was numb, and Roger's eyes were instantly bloodshot. At this moment, the hesitation and timidity disappeared completely, and the desire to survive overwhelmed all fear. He raised the iron axe in his hand, and poured all his strength into it after 3 times of strengthening. Aimed at the murloc's neck, then slammed it up. The iron axe chopped up fish scales, severing muscles and nerves. Roger's full blow only hit the opponent severely, but failed to kill him. Blood was splattered everywhere, and the murloc that was dying became even more crazy. Roger did not flinch, and drew out the iron axe to chop again. 1 axe, 2 axe, 3 axe. He numbly waved the weapon in his hand. After an unknown period of time, a ferocious head fell from his neck, and blood rushed into Roger's face like a fountain. Without his head, the monster naturally died and couldn't die anymore, but Roger didn't seem to feel it, and he was still slashing mechanically until the headless corpse was chopped to blood. Roger regained his senses abruptly, and his violent exhaustion suddenly surged up. His mouth was torn apart, and his arms were a little out of force due to excessive force. Before he could take a breath, there was a loud noise from the edge of the door frame. Then the door shattered and another murloc broke in. Fuck! Roger only had time to curse, and then he lifted the iron axe in his hand, and slammed into the study nearby. It's obviously not a wise move to face the opponent Hedon with his current physical condition. Roger rolled on the ground, and then rushed to the corner beside the door. He held the iron axe in his hand, but his attention was completely outside the house. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com 1, 2, 3. He counted silently until he heard the heavy footsteps of murlocs coming from the room, and then there was a crackling sound. A piece of the floor in the study was suddenly lifted up, shooting outwards at a very fast speed. It's now. The brain was extremely calm at this moment. Roger took a deep breath, and then rushed out. When he rushed out of the study, he saw a murloc being slapped on a wooden board, staggering back. At this time, the murloc obviously also noticed Roger, but he was in the impact, and he couldn't react for a while. Confronted a monster Hedon, and Roger was so frightened that his legs were weak, but at this time he was already unable to retreat, so he could only gritted his teeth and rushed up. With the force of the forward thrust and the impact of the wooden plank just now, Roger leaped forward, raising the iron axe in his hand high, and slashing fiercely on the Murloc's forehead. Click! The huge counterattack almost made the iron axe get out of his hand. He missed his head and couldn't cut his neck. Although the Murloc was hit hard, he still had the power to counterattack. At a critical moment, Roger abandoned the iron axe in his hand, shot his body, and jumped wildly into the distance. Stab! There was a fierce pain in his back, and Roger rolled and rushed out. At this time, the Murloc had already stood up shaking with the iron axe stuck in his forehead. The sky was spinning, and his eyes were a little dark. Roger rolled to avoid the attack of the Murloc. He copied a thick wooden stick and took advantage of the gap between an attack. He picked up the stick and smashed it on the back of the axe. Die to me! Click! The axe blade followed the gap that was previously split all the way down and poured into the depths of the Murloc's brain. Killed the second Murloc. Roger, who was completely relieved, staggered and fell to the ground. He was gasping for breath, and his arms could not be lifted at all because of muscle strain. However, after taking a short rest, he stood up again, picked up the wooden stick that had fallen far away, and smashed it at the Murloc's head a few times, until he confirmed that the opponent was completely dead, then slowly approached, broke out the iron axe stuck in the skull. In the previous life movies, there are too many plots of being killed. He doesn't want to be the protagonist of the defeat. When he came to the door, a big hole was broken in the door, and the rain poured in with strong wind, and faint gunshots could be heard from the lighthouse in the distance. Unable to take a break, Roger found the nails and planks tremblingly. He didn't know if other monsters would attack in the future, but at least the broken doors and windows should be repaired slightly. As for the lighthouse, he dare not go now. Listening to the gunshots, the situation there might not be too good. On such a stormy night, if you approached rashly, you might be treated as a monster by Kant and blow your head with one shot. What made Roger extremely grateful was that it was because Kant had attracted attention until he barely blocked the hole, and there were no monsters near the wooden house. There was blood in the room, but Roger couldn't care too much at this time. He held the iron axe and stayed exhausted until dawn. The sky is clear, and the showers have stopped. Happiness. Outside the wooden house, a tall figure with a shotgun strode towards the stagnant water. Who? Before he could get close to the wooden house, a chubby thing suddenly flew in the sky, tumbled and landed at his feet. Kant looked down, his face changed abruptly. Roger holding an axe, standing half of his body outside the door, he looked at Kant in the distance. Dear Mr. Kant, can you tell me, what is this? The blood on his face didn't dry, but stick to it sticky. After the blood coagulated, as Roger's expression changed, a face looked extremely hideous. You didn't even die. Looking at the head of the Murloc at his feet, Kant's eyes widened, and he looked at Roger in amazement. You seem to want me to die. Roger's tone was a bit aggressive. Kant didn't care about this, he obviously hadn't recovered from the impact. Just hesitated a little, Kant sighed, since you have seen it, then I can't hide it from you. He gave Roger a deep look. What an incredible guy. Go wash, then go to the lighthouse to find me, I will tell you everything I know. The crisis was temporarily relieved and Roger relaxed a little bit. Only then did he notice that the wooden house model in his mind was glowing with a faint light. Monster corpses were detected, and usable parts were found. There is no anatomy and alchemy room in the basic structure of the wooden house, and related functions cannot be turned on. Monster Illustrated Book is updated, Alchemy Notes is updated. Seeing this news, Roger's eyes lit up and he walked quickly to the study, although after the battle last night, it was a mess. But in his field of vision, those books are placed on the shelf intact. Roger drew out the Monster Illustration Book. There are more words and patterns on the originally empty books. Gulf Murloc, a low-level mutant that lives near isolated islands and has a basic structure similar to human appearance. The height of adults is 1.3 to 1.6 meters, and the strength is similar to that of ordinary human adult men. Is cruel by nature, moves quickly, has sharp claws and teeth, and the scales on the body can provide considerable defense. Live in groups. Weaknesses: heart, coccyx, and lower limb joints. Some structures such as cheeks and lungs can be used to extract special substances to make medicines. In addition to a simple name introduction, there is also a clear picture above, showing this creature from multiple angles. Roger couldn't help but sigh. If he saw the news in advance last night, it would be easier to deal with it. Fortunately, he prepared some small organs in the room in advance to deal with possible attacks by Kant. Otherwise, even if he could kill the Murloc, he would be seriously injured and killed himself. The back is just a skin trauma. Once I ask Kant to help with a simple treatment, it should be enough. The alchemy notebook updated was an alchemy potion with the body parts of the Gulf Murloc as the main material. There were too many things needed, and Roger just looked at it casually and put it back in place. It is a pity that there is no so-called dissection room and alchemy room, otherwise most of the materials on the monster should be able to be used. The wooden house in front of him couldn't solve these problems. Roger had also thought about expanding it, but unfortunately, this method didn't work at all. I hope I have the opportunity to find a bigger house in the future. Maybe one day, I can reproduce a castle like Kyle Moam in this world, and then raise a few lovely sorcerers. With thoughts in his mind, he began to look forward to a happy life in the future. Roger walked to the beach to wash the blood off of his body. He looked at the young face reflected in the calm water, and he was a little lost for a while. This is a young and even a little immature face, with black hair, which looks like a mixed race, but at this time, there are things that make Roger feel a little scared in his eyes. That was a little bit of excitement. What are you excited about? Killing, or the rest of life? It must be the latter, Roger said silently to himself. After changing his clothes, he wiped the iron axe dry and pinned it to his waist, and then came to the iron gate under the lighthouse. The door is unlocked. Kant's voice came from inside. Roger pushed the door in. Kant inside was picking up the clutter. He piled some clutter on the side and cleared a small area. From today, UU reading www.uuganshu.com, you live here tonight. Roger was taken aback for a moment, but then, Kant's words let him know the reason. They will come again. As long as the storm continues, they may come again at any time. Kant repeated it again. Storm. Roger suddenly remembered the night he came to the island. Normal people would never choose to go out under such weather conditions. Now it seems that Kant was investigating the situation and happened to meet himself who was washed ashore. What it is? Roger asked. Kant frowned slightly when he heard the word things, but he thought for a moment, whatever you call them, Murlocs, water ghosts. They are not humans anyway. Do the police know what's going on here? This is Roger's biggest concern, and many problems can be seen from the official attitude towards these monsters. How can it be? Kant sneered. I once told them once, but the guys with big in their heads thought I was crazy. You can show them the evidence, with these Murloc bodies. At this point, Roger was taken aback, and he suddenly realized that he hadn't seen a Murloc body around the lighthouse. Kant raised his eyebrows. Are you aware of the problem? Except for the ones in your room, none of those things have left any corpses so far. All the dead monsters have been dragged away by their companions. Who knows where they went, maybe they were eaten. Kant said lightly. He sighed, about these things, I will start from the beginning. The sea area where we are now belongs to the city of Bordeaux, where there are frequent storms and many meteorological observation points have been set up in coastal areas. This is based on a lighthouse that was rebuilt many years ago. Kant stopped his work. I was assigned here 2 years ago. My last observer was named Nick. That was a good guy who was optimistic and just. He is about to retire, so I will take over his job. Our work handover lasted about a month, but just the day before he left, a rare storm hit suddenly. I have been at sea for so many years, and I have never seen the sea so violent. It feels like it is expecting something. The heavy rain lasted for nearly a week. We completely cut off contact with the outside world. There were no phones and no ships. There were only two of us. Fortunately, the food left in the lighthouse was plentiful. It is estimated that we can eat for half a year. But on the seventh day of the storm, those terrifying monsters surged up with the tide. When we saw those things for the first time, we were frightened, in a rush, and even forgot the gun in our hands. There was a trace of fear on Kant's face. That night, their roars echoed in our ears, and they waited until dawn before returning to the sea. And that was the beginning of the nightmare. In the next day, those monsters will rush to shore with the storm. They seem to want to destroy the light on the lighthouse, stack them together, and climb up frantically. Nick and I can only hold the gun in our hands. Kant made a shot at Roger. Boom boom boom. One after another, shoot their heads. But there were too many of them, and Nick was so old, there was a problem with the direction of his guard in the dark. He was torn his chest by those monsters, and then torn from the lighthouse. Kant sighed. When I went out on the second day, I only saw a pool of blood in the gravel below. It didn't take long for the pool of blood to be washed away by the sea. The storm that lasted for nearly half a month finally subsided, the sky cleared, and I waited for 3 consecutive nights, but the monsters seemed to disappear and never appeared again. On the 5th day, the supply ship approached the island. He originally came to take Nick home, but now he can't even find a corpse. I will retell the story in detail to the contact person on board. There was a trace of fatigue on Kant's face. But everyone thought I had hallucinations. They told me that Nick should have fallen into the sea when the storm came. There are no monsters in this world. All this is just my imagination. They even sent a psychological counselor to stay with me on the island for half a month. But nothing happened. At that time, even I thought I had a mental problem. 1 month after the counselor left, everything was normal, just when I thought my life was back on track. On a stormy night, those monsters appeared again. Kant rubbed his rough face. Since no one believes it, it doesn't matter. One day I will kill the last monster, and then pull his corpse to tell everyone that Lao Tzu is right. Kant growled his face and whispered. Roger just listened carefully without making any sound. But after hearing Kant's words, instead of solving the doubts in his heart, he became even more anxious. He wanted to speak several times, but when the words reached his lips, he swallowed abruptly. If he didn't see that scene at the beach that night, he might believe Kant, but now, he only felt a chill on his back, and even wanted to turn around and escape the lighthouse. But where else can he go? It was good luck last night. If one more monster attacked him, then Roger's body might be completely cold now. He has never been so eager to become stronger at this moment. I took out the bottom 2 floors of the lighthouse. The bottom one is for your residence, and the top one is our restaurant. You can stay here these days and nights. Kant said to Roger. You can give me a gun, and I can help you guard the lighthouse at night. Roger proposed. Kant shook his head. Only 1 gun remains on the island, and the bullets are limited. He looked at Roger. Great little guy, take a good rest here. After these few days, I will send you to the nearby town when the supply ship arrives. You have been missing for so long, and your parents should have been waiting in a hurry. Parents. Roger pretended to be in pain, he hugged his head and whispered, I can't remember, I don't remember anything except my name. Poor little guy. Next, Kant simply helped Roger deal with the wound on his back, and then showed him the 2 floors below the lighthouse. In fact, there is nothing to see, the internal structure is simple, and there are few decent pieces of furniture. But this time, Roger didn't hear any strange noises. After last night's battle, he stayed for another night, and he was exhausted. After hesitating a little, Roger did not choose to rest in the lighthouse, but found an excuse and returned to his cabin. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com. He dragged the corpses of the two murlocs out and dug a shallow hole behind the woods. With the current situation, the corpses would smell bad if left for a long time. Cleaned the wooden house, the tired Roger lay on the bed and quickly fell asleep. After 8 hours, he will become alive again. At the same time, on the upper level of the lighthouse, Kant unlocked the key and opened one of the rooms. The room was full of unpleasant stench, and a humanoid creature was bound in a simple iron cage. "This is God's will, I didn't want to do this, but they turned out to be 1 month earlier than before. Is my calculation wrong? There shouldn't have been an attack this time around." Kant hugged his head. "Who can tell me what should I do? He is still just a child." But soon the hesitation in his eyes gradually disappeared, and the expression on his face became hideous. "Who can prove that he has been here? No one, no one. It's God who wants him to die. Just wait a few days for a ship to land before he can leave here. But now he discovered the secrets of the island, and he will tell others that it will not be long before many people will come here." The expression in Kant's eyes gradually became firmer. "No way. We must not let anyone know our secrets." Kant looked at the figure in the cage with gentle eyes. He stretched out his hand to touch the opponent's cheek, but all he got was a violent struggle and a growl stuck in his throat. All the hesitation completely disappeared, and a strong murderous intent appeared in his eyes. "Kill him, just tonight."